This week on LTC News, DIY holiday gifts. Oh wow, look at that. Yeah. The Wish Project's winter needs.
Now is the time that we need the winter things the most. In fact, in the month of October, we had 600 clients get clothing.
And Dr. Khelfaoui in his own words.
These 3 years were academically the best 3 years on record for the city of Lowell.
Stay with us. Welcome to LTC News. I'm your news anchor, Alanna Flood. On July 18th, the school committee voted 4-3 to start the termination process for Superintendent Dr. Khelfaoui, despite the fact that his contract would not expire until June 2020. Since that meeting, there have been accusations on both sides, and public hearings on the issue have been scheduled and canceled several times. We know that people are wondering what is going on, so we invited Dr. Khelfaoui into LTC to explain his perspective. We also invited a representative of the school committee and the mayor to come in, but they declined. The following segment with Dr. Khelfaoui is taken from a longer interview. The termination took Dr. Khelfaoui by surprise.
We got everything going well for us, and then here we go. This thing comes up, and the way it was done, that quite puzzled me, and I never could understand it. It was at the end of my tenure there. We had 3 years. These 3 years were academically the best 3 years on record for the city of Lowell, for the public schools, and this is not something that and it's undeniable. It's there. You could check it. It wasn't really not an action of the school committee. It was an action of 4 people only out of the 7. The others were absolutely opposed to it.
According to Dr. Khelfaoui, it was the city solicitor who led the effort to remove him from his position and to make the separation a public matter. He was already looking for another position and was a finalist for superintendent in Randolph. He said the very public motion to terminate hurt his reputation.
The city solicitor is not the attorney on the schools. We have our own attorney. I find that to be very disturbing, that a city solicitor would work with one member behind the scenes and advising them what to do to get rid of their, in that public way, in a very shameful way. I mean, every meeting had become more like an inquisition board. I mean, it's like it became ridiculous because it was become a hard task to focus. There were 3 members that, we didn't get along on the personality, we didn't get along on the style, we didn't get along. And, I said, maybe it's time for me to move on. I mean, I did all I can do. I delivered the best performance. I delivered 3 great years. Maybe it's time for me to seek my, maybe go somewhere else, and that's fine. And I notified the mayor of that, and we talked about that. He was absolutely clear, and I'm quoting here when he said, we have a lot of challenges, and I am absolutely sure that we can handle them better with you than without you. And I thanked him for his support. And that's what made me withdraw from the Randolph process, because I thought at least I had a 4th vote, and I said, all right, I'll swallow my pride and I'll deal with this nonsense for the benefit of the schools. Well, the motives are very clear. I mean, if you look at the tapes of the meetings, I mean, and you look at all that hostile environment, is why because I refused to hire their selected person for the high school principal, and they went after me meeting after meeting with that. They wanted to inject themselves into the search committee. Whatever. Most of the people you talk to, they'll tell you, oh, come on, we know why he was let go. It has nothing to do with this. It has to do with the fact because they couldn't control him. All you have to do is look at the history. In the last 10 years, there have been 4 of us of following the same phase. It's a little bit different style, but 4 of us.
Dr. Khelfaoui was officially terminated by the school committee on November 14th. Now he will proceed with a lawsuit against the city. We will keep you up to date on this story as the lawsuit moves forward. After 11 years in the Foundry Industrial Park in Lowell, the Wish Project has a new temporary home in North Chelmsford. David Fitzgerald, the executive director of the Wish Project, explains what they do and what the families they serve need as the weather gets cold.
We're very excited to be in our new location. It took us a while to get everything set up and running, but now we're up and running at 166 Middlesex Street. We have volunteers coming in daily. We have supplies and things going out, clothes going out, and diapers going out to the clients and the social workers. So it's really nice to be in a new location. The building is in excellent shape, and we're really happy to be here. But we haven't stopped looking for a building. We're going to now, because we have a lease for 1 year at this location, continue our building search with the board of directors heading up a search for a building and working with a realty team to find the Wish Project a new home. Well, the mission of the Wish Project is to serve homeless and low-income families in the Merrimack Valley with clothing and household goods. Also, we service the social service agencies in the area.
Any clients that are needing furnishing or like help with the Christmas, they go through the agencies. And then the agencies put in, which they call a wish, and then we fulfill that wish, as if it's beds, linens. Like I said, right now our biggest thing we keep talking about is Christmas, because Christmas is coming up. So a lot of our agencies, they will be providing right now their Christmas lists.
We have over 7,000 people come in a year and help volunteer for us, giving us more than 3,000 hours of volunteer work. Last year, we served over 60,000 people. Over 20,000 families came and used our services, either directly or through the social service agencies that we work with and partner with in the community. But one of our major projects is called The Magic of Christmas, where we provide families and children with Christmas gifts through volunteers who bring in and the community who donates the items. We then match them with families, and last year we served over 6,000 people through the Magic of Christmas, and we're gearing up for that right now.
We have like 40 to 50 agencies and give out nearly 10,000 gifts before Christmas time, so it's massive. So if people like to do holiday shopping, they're welcome to donate whatever they have in excess to us, any new things, new socks. You'd be surprised at how basic the need is. We have a child every year, at least one child every year, who asks for a shovel for Christmas so they can help their family pay their bills, help their father shovel sidewalks for money. So it's not all everybody wanting Nintendo sets. It's people wanting very basic things.
Well, there is a list, and I would defer them to the list every time. But household goods and clothing are pretty much always accepted. Furniture, you have to call ahead because of the size of our new operation doesn't give us the flexibility to take anything at any time. So call ahead for furniture.
Actually, one thing we're desperate for is heaters. Half of our clients will come in the next month looking for a heater, and we currently have none. Although our ongoing need is always beds. We have no mattresses at the moment, and every client who walks through our door is looking for at least one bed, usually for their child, if not 2 or 3. Now is the time that we need the winter things the most. In fact, in the month of October, we had 600 clients get clothing, which is about the equivalent of 3 months' worth. So we were closed for 2 months when we relocated from our previous location to now.
The Wish Project posts up-to-the-minute requests on Facebook for what donations are most needed. Da-da-da-da-da, they say it's your birthday! 1968 to 2018, it's the 50th anniversary of the release of the Beatles' White Album. A panel discussion called Helter Skelter, the White Album and the Impact of 1968, was held at LTC on November 8th. They discussed the impact of the Beatles' music on the cultural and political climate of the time.
So the White Album, 30 songs, 2 discs. Very unusual at the time. 1968, a double album coming out was terrifically unusual. The cover of the album was very unusual. A completely blank white album.
In the mid-60s, there was a very active rock venue, the Commodore Ballroom. The Doors played there in 1967 when Light My Fire was the #1 song in the country. There was a very active music consumer culture. There were 2 successful record stores, Garnick's and Record Lane.
But I remember very clearly saying there's 2 cultures here. There's one of death, there's one of destruction, there's one of Vietnam, there's one of the young men and women coming home in a box, and then there's life, and there's love, and there's buttons, and all you need is love. And there was, above all else, the music. And I was tied to these guys, and I was tied to all of you who are my age. I didn't know you, but I felt you.
I'm immediately transformed backwards. There's something about certain music that I can almost tell you where I was when that song was playing in my brain, when I was trying to levitate the Pentagon or whatever I was thinking I was going to do on the streets of Chicago in 1968. But there's probably not been anything like the phenomenon of the British invasion. I won't just say the Beatles. Of that whole era of music coming over. Again, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Kinks, and I mean, there's a whole host of music that is inescapable in defining who I am, and probably for a lot of us in here, who we are as well.
The event was part of a larger initiative to make Lowell a UNESCO City of Learning, which would make it the first city in the United States with that designation. UML political science professor John Wooding is leading the effort.
The idea of the Learning City is actually a UNESCO-based idea. UNESCO started the Learning Cities program internationally about 10 years ago. And over 140 cities around the world are now designated as UNESCO Learning Cities. And the idea behind it is using learning in its very broadest possible sense to develop the community, the social capital in the community, to help with skills training, to help think about how people can find a learning environment outside the classroom, and indeed how they can learn from each other. And it's a way of framing a city. So we brought this idea to Lowell, as Lowell becoming a city of learning, and we've applied for that status under the UNESCO program. And if we get that status, we'll be the first UNESCO learning city in the United States. The real core of this is the way in which we frame Lowell as a learning city. And we sort of brand it. It's sort of a way of taking all the great stuff that goes on in Lowell, much of it about learning, on behalf of the university and the community college and the park and the city school system, plus all the literally thousands of not-for-profit organizations who teach everything from gardening to citizenship training to English as a second language to how to do glass blowing and learn to play guitar. So we're trying to bring them all together under this rubric as a city of learning.
The White Album Super Deluxe Edition released this month will set you back $160. If you're a lifelong fan of the Fab Four, it just might be worth it. For the holidays, buy local is good, but make local is better. In this locally made segment, I show you where you can get your hands dirty and let your creativity flow by making your very own holiday gift. It's never too early to start thinking about your holiday shopping list, and during this time of year, there are plenty of places throughout the city where you can create your very own gift. Here at the Pottery Mill, you can create gifts with clay, just like this mug.
In this holiday season, you can make a few little trinkets, whether you want to make pinch pots for your succulents or little picture frames or Christmas ornaments. Right now, I just wedged some clay for us. And if you're not into Christmas, you could do snowflakes or other different holiday things just to kind of stay in the spirit and get creative and have some fun. You can put your elbows on your thighs. You want to make sure that you have like a nice kind of consistent, stable position. We're also doing a Santa workshop. Courtney is running it where you can make little Santa gnomes.
I am making little figurines. They can either be a gnome or Santas or wizards, really, anything you want to make it into that has a tall hat.
This cute little guy.
That is a gnome. And then I have this little red one here that is a Santa.
And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to widen my base. So I'm going to use this part of my finger instead, and I'm going to push towards my right hand. We are a non-intimidating space. We assume everybody has no experience, so we start them right from the get-go. And if you do have some experience, maybe you'll pick up a little bit of something extra, and we can go as simple and as advanced as you need. And you can do this a few times, so you don't expect to squeeze too hard and have your clay come up on the first round.
And just like that, in moments, there's a creation.
I have an undergraduate in fine arts, and I had no place to work. And this place had a very little space available, and I just invested in a bunch of wheels, and next thing you know, we have all these lovely people just taking classes and loving clay and working with it all the time.
And now it's my turn.
Good.
Now slow is the key.
Yes, slow and consistent. Fabulous.
I am totally new at this. I've never done it before, so it was a new experience, and now I'm just glazing them.
What exactly is glaze?
So glaze it's essentially glass, and what it does is it covers your piece. It's actually made out of 3 compounds. It's a feldspar, it's a glass, and it's clay. And what you do is the way you get all the pretty colors, there's just additives in it. So for example, turquoise would be made with a copper carb. And for example, this really nice blue was our royal blue. That's cobalt carb. So they're all like just natural ingredients that are found in the earth. Yep. So.
Oh wow, look at that.
Yep. And you're gonna slowly let go.
Woo!
That looks great.
So I'll come back and then glaze it, and then it'll get fired. So
And then you'll come back and pick it up after that.
this is why you're having classes in early December, so people will have enough time to fire their projects.
Exactly. And there's a process too, and it's not like it can go right in the kiln right afterwards. It needs time to dry. And that's it. You made a bowl. Isn't that
Ta-da!
nice?
It's wonderful. I can't wait to go back and pick up my finished bowl. In addition to the pottery mill, there are opportunities to make holiday gifts like glass ornaments, soaps, and more at Western Avenue Studios. Check their website for details on upcoming classes and events. Also be sure to mark your calendar for other citywide shopping events, like Lowell's Small Business Saturday on November 24th. Just think, you get to avoid the headaches of the mall and the worry of online gift packages being swiped and support the local economy. Sounds like a win-win to me. Here's a list of other upcoming art events that are not to be missed. In this week's Sunspot, Lowell Sun Enterprise editor Chris Scott sits down with newly elected State Senator Edward Kennedy.
We're here with City Councilor Ed Kennedy, or I should say, soon-to-be ex-councilor Ed Kennedy and Senator-elect Ed Kennedy.
Yes. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks again for coming in.
Yeah.
I think this is about the 3rd or 4th time you've been in now. I know you came in to talk about the high school early on, and then prior to the primary, you came in September to talk about the primary fight.
Right.
Where you beat back, what, 3 other candidates or 4?
4.
4. And then you went on to beat John McDonald in the general election just earlier this month.
Right. Right. The primary was a pretty competitive race. And this is probably the longest campaign that I've ever had.
Yeah.
I think we started collecting signatures maybe at the end of March, early April. And, you know, I did a lot of canvassing throughout the summer and into the fall. So it was a very long campaign.
You're a pretty well-known commodity in Lowell, particularly in Belvedere, where over the last 6 months to a year, you were very involved in the high school debate and keeping it downtown as opposed to Colley Stadium. How much work did you do in Lowell compared to the other communities in the district? Or did you kind of take Lowell for granted, or?
No, we didn't take Lowell for granted at all. You know, Lowell is approximately 50% of the district, so you certainly can't take it for granted. And you're right, I am better known in Lowell than in the towns, but still, you got to campaign. You know, people want to see you're out campaigning, but we did dedicate a lot of time to each of the towns and campaigned a lot there, and I think it paid off in the primary and then in November as well.
Yeah, my colleague at the Sun, Rick Sobey, did a piece in the column recently looking at the communities, the suburban communities and Lowell, and you won fairly handily in each community, correct?
We won in every community, and you know, there are a total of 50 precincts in the district. So there's 33.
50 precincts in 6 towns, right?
It's in 6 communities. So there's 33 precincts in Lowell and 17 in the towns when you add them up, so that's 50. And we won 48 out of the 50. I think there was 1 precinct in Tingsboro and 1 precinct in Pepperell that we didn't win. So we'll just focus on those a little more for next time.
When you look back now, what do you attribute that most to? That's a fairly convincing win. I mean, John McDonald, he's a fairly outspoken guy, as we saw that night at the debate at UMass Lowell, which I moderated on stage with the two of you. Where do you think that came from? That's a good whooping.
We focused on issues and kept the campaign positive. I think for the most part in the primary, it was a positive campaign from with everybody that was running, and we kept it that way for the 2 months after between the primary and the election. I'm not sure that I think that the Republican had a different strategy, and that I don't think that strategy was successful as the results would show.
I've been in the city here for a long time, and as have you, and many of the political watchers around here say one of the things that you have going for you is your name, Edward Kennedy. And believe it or not, these people say, people still think that he's the Ed Kennedy, the senator who served the state for a number of years.
Yeah.
I always wanted to ask you about that. Do you think they're just pulling my leg, or do you think there just might be a little bit of
I think that
trade-off on that?
I think that they're pulling your leg. I don't think anybody thinks that. I mean, Senator Kennedy has passed away several years ago.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody in Lowell thinks that, certainly at this point. I think that they're able to make the difference. I also think the voters are smarter than that, and a little bit more informed than people that say that. But I do think this. I think it's probably fair to say that if you hear my name 2 or 3 times, you remember it easier than say another name that you may have to hear half a dozen times before you remember it.
Good point. So what do you think the main issue was in the city that worked to your advantage? Was it the high school? And what was the main issue out in the towns that you were able to capitalize on?
Well, with the towns, it was making sure that they were comfortable that they would have representation, and that I would be out in the towns, and so that's what it was for them. One of the things that I learned in campaigning is that each of the towns, you can't just say, well, there's Lowell and then there's the 5 towns. Each of the towns have their own identity, their own set of problems, and they're all a little bit different from each other. So that Westvid, for instance, is a town that has a real strong commercial industrial tax base. And they've been able to do that without it being detrimental to the neighborhoods. They've been able to preserve the neighborhoods. They also, and part of the reason why they have that is that they're along the 495 corridor. Dunstable and Pepperell, they don't have that. They're a little bit more remote. And so for them, it's a little bit different. Groton has a great central business district, but also it's a little bit more remote. And so for those towns, they need to, in my opinion, just sort of rely on a different, just a different environment than say Westvid or certainly Lowell.
You mentioned representation in the towns, and that you promised to be out there, as much as humanly possible. We talked a little bit about this off air before today. Your plan is to keep your seat on the city council until something happens related to the high school. So there's nothing illegal with being in the state senate and being on the city council simultaneously.
Right.
You plan to do that. Now, I know my newspaper has been critical of that plan. What do you hear in the communities? Does anyone say, well, how can you possibly do that? I guess not if you were elected so convincingly.
I think that I think it's very doable. That Philip Shea, when he was elected as state rep, he served the year as a city councilor. C. Pangiatakis, when he became a state rep, served on the school committee. You could look at Leo Foley if you want to go way back.
Way back now.
But there's a lot of people that have done that. When I first decided to run, there were people who were willing to support me, but who did not want to lose a vote on the city council for the high school. And so I made a commitment to them that I would stay on the city council until such time as we vote on the bond authorization. And I intend to live up to that commitment. I do think that it really, nobody ever asked me about that during the campaign, other than certain opponents and the newspaper.
Correct.
But for anybody else, it was never an issue. And I would point out that the city council job in Lowell is considered to be a part-time job. and that everybody, or almost everybody on the city council, has a full-time job that they do during the day. So to be in the state senate and to serve on the city council, I don't think is any different than that.
When you resign, first of all, when do you expect the loan order to actually happen?
I'm expecting the loan order to be in May.
Okay.
You know, whether it's in April or June remains to be seen, but my best guess would be that it would probably be around May.
The city seems to be acting fairly swiftly on acquiring the doctor's building. On November 14th, there was a deed, on the 13th rather, the deed was recorded at the Registry of Deeds to actually take ownership of that. So it does seem to be moving fast. When you resign from the city council, your spot, according to city law, will be taken by the 10th place finisher in the last city election.
Right.
And that was Khelfaoui Chow.
Yes.
Right? In covering that race, Khelfaoui Chow was a proponent for the Cawley site.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever consider saying to him, hey, will you give me your word that you'll work with the majority of the council and pass the loan order, and then that way you would have been able to resign? Or did you consider that at all?
No, I've known Khelfaoui Chow for a long time. We're good friends. We differed on the high school, but I think on most other issues we're the same. But my commitment is not to Khelfaoui Chow or to anybody else on the council. It's to those supporters who wanted to be sure that there were going to be the votes necessary to pass the loan authorization. And so that's what I'm doing, is just living up to that commitment.
Okay. You mentioned off air that you intend to meet with the Senate President, Karen Spilka, someday maybe later this month, or maybe around the week of Thanksgiving, correct?
I'm hoping to meet with her next week, actually.
What do you hope to learn from her, and what are you envisioning happening in that meeting?
Well, I think first of all, I'll find out a little bit about the lay of the land, where my office space would be, how many people I can hire, what type of budget the office has for in different accounts, but also to talk about committee assignments and what committees I would like, and what committees might be available to me.
I've known you for a long time. I've known you as a city councilor. I think I've known you as a county commissioner, correct?
Yes.
Have you held any other elected posts?
No.
Okay, so this will be your third elected post. How can you take what you've learned through the city council and through, believe it or not, many years ago, the Middlesex County Commission, and apply it to the state senate?
Well, I think it's just having the experience of being in government. And what I've said during the campaign is that if you serve on the city council, what you quickly learn, and even in the county, what you quickly learn is that everything happens on Beacon Hill. All the money comes from Beacon Hill, the grants and so forth. All of that becomes available from the State House. And so that's what I've learned. And also years ago, I served for 5 years as a legislative liaison for a Massachusetts department, and so that gave me some legislative experience. So I expect to catch on pretty quickly. I also have a good relationship with the delegation, the State House delegation as it exists now, and with several other sitting senators. So I expect that. And I have a good relationship with my predecessors, both with Eileen Donahue and with Steve Panjataka. So I'll have a lot of support going forward from all of those people, and so I'm hoping to be a very effective state senator in my first term.
We have about a minute left, so I appreciate you coming in again today. I'd like to ask you just one last question. What would be your first bill, or what would you like to accomplish most right out of the gate?
Right out of the gate, what I would really like to work on, and what I'd like to get accomplished, is changing the funding formula for Chapter 70 that's used for public schools.
And
I think
in what regard?
It needs to be increased. It needs to be increased. And it isn't just a Lowell thing. I think for the towns, what I've been hearing when I've been out in the towns is that they would like to see it increased as well.
Ed Kennedy, thank you for coming in.
All right.
I wish you luck in the state senate.
All right. Thank you very much, Chris.
That's it for this edition of LTC News. You can find us on LTC channels 8 and 99, online at ltc.org, on Roku in the LTC News playlist, or get the link on Facebook. I'm Alanna Flood. Thanks for joining us.